Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Julius Fredrickson. I'm the Vice President for Research. I really appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on why we're here. We in the Vice President for Research office, about a year ago, we were thinking about what are some of the things that we could do to sort of try to improve morale as we were coming out of the pandemic, even though we're still in it a little bit. But also, what could we do to promote a culture of research on campus? And we brainstormed about many different ideas. Some of those things we're already implementing. But one of the things that we wanted to do was to do a discussion panel about a topic that might be something that researchers tackle, but also something that would have a broad appeal. And we met with our chair of the Faculty Senate, Dr. Audrey Horsgaard, who is with us here today, and we talked about different ideas, and she suggested this topic. So, ethical implications of artificial intelligence. So we settled on that. Then we went to, we got nominations from the faculty for folks that might be interesting to talk to about this topic, and that's how we ended up with this terrific panel that you see behind me. So the topic today is AI game changer or game over. We're going to be talking about 4 general themes, but the questions that we're going to tackle are questions that were posted online by folks that RSVP to the event. So with that, we're going to get going. We're going to start with introductions. So after I introduce every one of our panelists, they're going to tell you a little bit about their scholarship and their research. So let me see. So we're going to start with, on our far end here, Dr. Orgul Ozturk, who is an associate professor of economics in the Darla Moore School of Business and an expert in labor and health economics.
Hi, everyone. I'm an applied microeconomist who is interested in labor, health, and education as a field of study. And my research mainly focuses on analysis of policy in labor, health, and education. Specifically, I try to understand how policy will affect access, utilization, and outcomes, basically, in these fields. For example, in labor, it will be wages and employment, or in healthcare, it is about access and utilization and outcomes. Similarly, in education. When it comes to AI, how I think about AI is going to be about how it's going to affect wages and employment, but also how it's going to affect healthcare provision and outcomes for patients. And in education, how we're going to have to think about disparities in access and outcomes, again, for our students and also teachers, and how can they do their jobs.
Thank you. Next, we have Bryant Walker-Smith. He's an associate professor in the School of Law and by courtesy in the College of Engineering and Computing, as well as an affiliate scholar at the Center for Internet and Society at Stanford Law School.
Oh, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here, particularly given some of the experts we have in the audience with us. So I focus on what I call the law of the newly possible. How law affects technology, how technology affects law, but everything is technology, right? Language is technology, artificial intelligence is technology, cars are technology. And so I'm interested in the new things that are coming and how they have always challenged us and how they will continue to challenge us. And my principal case study for that for, over 11 years now has been automated driving or self-driving cars, driverless cars, take your term of choice, and really looking at how law will and should address our emerging transport technologies.
All right. Next, we have Dr. Jane Roberts, who is a Carolina Distinguished Professor in the Department of Psychology and the Associate Dean for Natural Sciences in the College of Arts and Sciences.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, and just want to tell you a little bit about my background and how I'm not such an expert in AI, which I think is actually nice that we have a whole spectrum of experience. So my background is actually in school psychology, which is really founded on learning, particularly for young children. And my work really focuses on identifying young children who are at risk for learning or behavioral outcomes, specifically autism, also anxiety and ADHD. And so the ways in which I'm interested and use AI is really in implementing implementing techniques that allow us to more efficiently or more accurately provide detection, prevention, or treatment for a whole risk of health conditions.
All right, thank you, Jane. So last but not least, Dr. Forest Agostinelli is an assistant professor in computer science and a member of the AI Institute in the College of Engineering and Computing.
Hi, everybody. So my field of research looks at explainable artificial intelligence and how we can use explainable artificial intelligence to discover new knowledge. So AI can be used to solve a variety of different problems, but oftentimes we can't actually learn anything new about the problem itself. And a lot of times there are problems that may be too difficult for AI to currently solve, or too difficult to get it to solve it in a way that is going to be helpful to us. So I'm looking at how AI can be seeded with our knowledge, our own ideas, so that we can create a positive feedback loop where humans learn from AI and AI learns from humans, not just in the field of education, but also on the frontiers of research.
Excellent, thank you. So like I said earlier, we're gonna have 4 different themes that we're gonna get into, but before we get into that, maybe Forrest, we can come back to you and you can tell us a little bit about what is AI?
So AI has 2 main subfields. One is concerned with biological intelligence and how we can emulate that in computers, and the other one is concerned with how we can behave rationally using computing. And so on the biological intelligence side, there are a lot of different species that we deem intelligent. For example, elephants and whales are obvious ones. People often deem their pets as intelligent. I know mine are. People think, ants are intelligent, and even organisms that don't have a brain, such as mold, Physarum is one that actually seems to exhibit intelligent behavior, and people even go as far as to think humans are intelligent. And so we want to then figure out how we can emulate that in a computer. And then the subfield that is more related to my research, behaving rationally, is concerned with how we can solve a problem in the most efficient way possible. So I often think of this as algorithms that create algorithms. And so in this field, we're often concerned with how do we characterize a particular problem. For example, I can characterize a problem as, say, a planning problem, or a classification problem, a reinforcement learning problem. And once I've characterized that problem, I have some algorithms that can be used to solve these problems. And so what we're really looking at is, what is an algorithm that I can create that can solve a whole class of problems? And so that's why I like to think of it as algorithms that create algorithms.
Wonderful, thank you. So we're gonna get into our first theme here. So Bryant, I'm gonna start with you. So we're gonna be first talking about AI bias and public trust. So here's a question that was posted online. The accuracy of AI in decision-making relies on large data sets for training, and it is straightforward to see how data sets that are in balance with regards to race or ethnic background, gender or age may perpetuate and even exaggerate negative biases. What are some examples of AI bias that concern you, and what can we do to correct for those biases? It's a big one.
Great, and I have an hour, right? No. So, wow, it's a really good question that I think gets into the heart of what we're talking about. So first, all right, problems with AI bias. Let me give you one example. Has anybody in the room used or heard of DALL-E or another image generation tool? Okay, so about half of the room has used it, and about half of the room in the next 5 minutes is going to be on their phone using it. So there are a number of these AI-based tools that associate text with images. And if you put in a text prompt, they will create an image, often a photorealistic image of something or someone that does not actually exist. Right? So you could say cat conducting orchestra, and you would get a picture of a cat conducting an orchestra. So I ran a number of runs in one of these programs on the prompt photo of a criminal. And the 16 images that I got back were almost entirely of a male of color wearing a hoodie. That was what the algorithm gave me for criminal. Now, that's a problem. And that's a problem whether or not we apply that. It's particularly a problem if we were to rely on that in any sort of decision making. But understanding why that's a problem is also itself concerning. Why? Is it because many of the images on the internet make that association? Is it because those images are based on data that itself might be misleading because of practices of enforcement or unfair practices of data collection? Is it itself a function of broader social issues that exacerbate these, and yet an AI tool that reflects that would entrench that bias? And regardless of the explanation, both the process and the result are disturbing. Now, I say this with a bit of a caveat, because I think, as the question pointed out, a lot of these systems are based on data sets, and those data sets are us, right? The phone call is coming from within the house, it's us. And so a lot of these tools are like funhouse mirrors. They reflect us back to ourselves. Sometimes that's distorted, sometimes that's magnified. Perhaps with work that you're doing and others are doing, that will be corrected or challenged. But we can't make the mistake of thinking that society is great, we're great, AI is different and other and strange and dangerous. In fact, so much of these existing problems are with us. So if we look at, for example, a study of how parole boards in Israel determined who would get parole and who would not, that was a function of how hungry they were, how far they were from lunch, right? You start off early, you have a good meal, you're very generous. The hungrier you get, the more risk averse you get, the fewer people who get parole, down to about 0%. And we could spend the next hour listing examples of human or social bias. And so when we come to solutions, the key is, how do we take the opportunities of AI, the incredible computation, the potential for auditing, even though that's a challenge, the potential centralization or the potential diffusion, and use those as ways to challenge not only AI bias, but also human and social bias. Is that a start?
That was a great start. I gotta say, this will be hard to follow up. Anybody want to weigh in?
I think we know from many studies now, AI makes such better predictions about risk of recidivism, for example, so much better than the judges. And still, we cannot eliminate bias, because judges tend to use whatever the AI is suggesting, the suggestion that's produced by them, in a different way. In Kentucky, for example, bail decisions, apparently judges ignore the prediction of AI in favor of harsher sentences for Black defendants. And we see some disparity, increased disparity, but not because of the poor job by AI, but better job by AI not being used properly by the humans controlling it.
Complex mix of imperfect human agents and imperfect machine agents. In driver assistance systems, we say they work unless and until they don't, which isn't very reassuring. And I think you're describing something that works unless and until it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
That's terrific. Let's go to our next question. So, Forrest, I'm going to come to you on this one. So often people talk about the black box of AI, meaning that the users cannot fully comprehend how AI functions. Is it really impossible for the users to understand how AI functions and where in their lives it is being applied? Does it matter or not that they do not understand? If so, why?
So I think, one, it matters whether or not people understand AI, especially if, even if they're using it just in their day-to-day lives, but especially if it's used for high-risk decisions. Also, I think there is just a benefit from understanding what AI is thinking that we could use to also discover new knowledge. So say, for example, some appliance, or even, for example, a car. In the booklet that you get with this appliance, with your car, you know the parameters of what is acceptable use and what is not acceptable use. You know the edge cases. You know under certain conditions, if it gets too hot, this isn't going to work. If you try to drive it in water, for example, it's not going to work. And so you know when you can expect it to be functional and when not. But say, for example, now your car has some self-driving capabilities, and what essentially you're using AI for is to infer things about the world. So based on some picture, can I tell whether or not there is a pedestrian present? And if you don't understand how it works, then it's going to be really hard to actually understand the parameters under which it will work. So you may have some data set and say, it's accurate 99.99% of the time, but there may be some particular case in which it's only accurate, say, 50% of the time. And you actually won't know what that case is. And so there could be people who are in this particular situation that get into nasty accidents because they didn't know the parameters under which this was acceptable use. Same thing is if you were a practitioner at a doctor's office, maybe it would be really good to know when it would be accurate at predicting some certain disease and when not. And also because we're using it to infer something about the world, so we're trying to learn something that maybe isn't immediately apparent to us, say for example from a scan telling whether or not a patient has a disease, if there's some really hard to detect disease that someone could live with but actually impact their life, and AI is not picking up on it because the decisions it's making actually aren't something that we would consider rational, then this could lead to this feedback loop where you're saying, X% of people seem to not have this disease, but actually it's picking up on some irrelevant features and making this prediction. When it comes to understanding it for our own benefit, like I was saying, we could actually learn new things about the world. So for example, the company DeepMind just came out with a paper that used AI to figure out how to do matrix multiplication even faster than we're already able to do it. So people have worked on algorithms to figure out how to do matrix multiplication, and this one actually found a faster way. And because we could actually understand the algorithm it used, we could put this into practice. And so this can lead to us actually improving the ways we do things if we're actually able to understand how AI is making its decisions.
Anybody want to follow up?
You described the concern of a black box that's unpredictable, right? That we don't fully understand, that's not controllable. And we might think of AI or we might think of humans, who are the epitome of the non-deterministic system. That's hard for us to understand. I don't even understand why I'm saying what I'm saying right now, right? I could come up with an explanation, but it would probably be self-delusion. And so I just want to come back to this broken record idea of, yes, AI is new in some ways for its challenges and opportunities. We as humans are also the source of a lot of these same challenges.
But we are better when we understand people, right? And people with emotional intelligence that are higher than others can relate to other humans, can understand, can manage them better. Similarly, I teach econometrics. So we use regression analysis, and statistical packages, computers made it possible for anyone to do this. It's not only my monopoly anymore, or my students can run it, and they can do it badly. And the fact that you can do it without understanding necessarily the underlying mechanism can actually be quite damaging. And I think it is for that reason very important. You don't need to know, or you don't need to be able to do it by hand. You don't need to be able to know the theory necessarily fully, but you need to understand that there goes an algorithm, there goes some thinking, and to be able to interpret it, you need to really be able to think about the data generating process, underlying process, and not just rely on whatever is coming out of AI. And so, yes, I think we need to definitely figure out the black box in some way or another.
You had a great point about being able to put yourself in
Yeah, so I think what you've mentioned really sort of speaks to sort of either owning or giving away that control or that knowledge in a sense of, we need to be able to check the solution, right? We need to be able to sort of say, does that make sense? And why would it not make sense? And so some of those solutions are going to be driven, as humans from our own experience. And we all have very unique experiences. And that's what, some of the limits of these algorithms is they're not going to be able to replicate all of the experiences that we have. So to be able to sort of, it's scary to put our fate in a machine because we can't identify with that machine. It feels as if we've lost control. We don't have that locus of control within us. Whereas if we see a mistake made by a colleague or by a human, it feels a little less unsettling because we can say, I would never make that mistake. I wouldn't have done that. And so I think sometimes the fear about AI and trustability really has to do with whether we're being systematic and checking those answers, and we need to do it for humans and for machines.
Excellent. This was quite good. So we're gonna switch gears a little bit. We're gonna tackle our next vignette or our next theme here, and that one is economic implications of AI. So Orgul, I'm gonna come to you on this first question. So here goes. AI-assisted automation is already replacing jobs, but it's also helping create new jobs. What do you see as the kinds of jobs that are most likely to be replaced in the future? And what kinds of new jobs might be created through the application of AI?
Okay, so somebody in the audience, when they were registering, asked, how is this any different than any other new technology that we've already experienced? I think in many ways it is not. It is just another creative destruction. This is another skill-based technological change, but this time on steroids. Earlier on, all the jobs that machines took over were routine tasks, routine jobs, non-cognitive jobs, or even when cognitive, they were jobs that can turn into a recipe. So if you can write anything in a procedure, if you can make it into a recipe, you could replace it by a machine. Now, a new set of tasks are under attack, I think, and this is more non-routine stuff. And even when it's cognitive, we are thinking about jobs that require more thinking that we thought machines couldn't do. This is something very new, and it's the AI, from what I understand so far, not only can do the recipe, but can come up with the best recipe that is, from the available recipes, and maybe potentially can create a new recipe, right? So that is, I think, what scares people. But it's not anything new. Any new technology always, I think, kind of scared us. But I feel going forward, any prediction task may be done by AI because they are better than us in predicting when enough data is available. But prediction is useless without decision. And in terms of decisions, any job that requires a decision, I think there's going to be several things going on. Either decisions are going to change in their nature, so things are maybe not going to disappear, but they're going to fundamentally be different. Or we are going to be able to actually maybe make more decisions, better decisions, and new decisions, because we're going to be able to do things that were not feasible before. Brain surgeons, when removing a tumor, are going to be able to do it so more precisely, so they are not going to take out tissue unnecessarily. Or we're going to be able to discover new drugs easily, quickly, and have personalized medicine. Or yes, actuaries are going to maybe disappearing because machines can predict risk scores much better than they can do, or a machine can go through applications and pick the most suitable candidates. But I think we are still going to have the decision made by a human to hire or not hire, or for the loans, to give the loan or not to give the loan. In terms of new decisions, maybe space is going to be now something we can actually commercialize. Because one thing I learned, AI is pretty good at predicting, apparently, space debris. And the fact that it was the main cause of the costliest part of space exploration is now possibly going to be less so. So maybe it is going to make space more accessible for everyone. It's going to be more satellites. And then there's going to be a need for people who can manage AI, who can program AI. Forest's job is never going away, hopefully. Or, people who are going to be able to interpret what AI produces and sustain AI. So those are the new jobs that's going to be certainly created. AI is going to create a lot of jobs that is related to us. But there's going to be, I think, indirect job creation too. For example, space commercialization is going to create a lot of downstream jobs. And it's going to also, having more satellites, going to make a lot of things, possible for a lot of people. AI can translate now with trade platforms. It's going to create more trade, and upstream and downstream more jobs related to it. I am pretty hopeful in terms of job creation being more than job destruction or job reshaping, I guess. But my husband told me the other day a group created Darth Vader's voice using AI technology. And if they can, I don't know, replace Darth Vader, I don't know if there's any hope for any of us.
Most important question is tonight is, when will we replace faculty with AI?
Nobody can replace us, right, Jane?
Of course not.
What tasks will be replaced, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not the whole job that disappears. It's can you
Yes.
automate certain aspects of a job so you need fewer to do it? And I think you've pointed to one of the questions, which is at the hypothetical end of this. There is no end, but will there be more jobs or fewer? And I think that's.
I mean, there is going to be fewer jobs that are done better by fewer people. Maybe those people are going to probably earn more, and there's going to be a lot of losers, yes. I mean, Forrest will say, just like an economist.
One thing I wanted to mention is that, a huge chunk of this research is publicly funded. We're a public institution, even private institutions get public funding. So essentially, AI should be a public good. And in an ideal world, AI, if your job can be done by computers, then you will be happy because, I can do more things that I want to do. And I think even, the White House recently took some steps somewhat in this direction, requiring that all publicly funded research, all publications have to be made available to the public within a year. So understanding that, the public funded this, we should be able to see the results of it. And so, also since the public is funding this, the public should benefit. So if, we put all our money into this research and then it actually turns out that it harms people, then something's wrong. It should actually benefit everybody. So, it's just a simple concept. We all paid for it. We should all benefit from it.
But I think coming back, it's going to help us hopefully be better teachers, because the biggest problem, us professors, I think, face is being able to teach to everyone. I think AI can personalize our ability. I mean, it will help us be more, in our teaching, more personalized. We can actually target our students and their learning levels and, knowledge levels better, hopefully.
But isn't the next step then just replacing the professor? I'm serious.
Don't give ideas. I don't think so. There may be fewer of us, maybe.
Okay.
But we will be teaching different stuff. I mean, we're already adopting. Somebody needs to teach people how to manage AI. Our executive ed is already teaching a lot about AI management and how to interpret AI results, how to be ahead of the game. So I think we can make it happen. We are smart people here.
But also beyond teaching too, for research, this has such an opportunity to accelerate the impact of what we do to a way that's really gonna, I don't even think it's fully realized at all. I think the other thing that AI really fosters is interdisciplinarity, which is really going to, again, enhance every project and every problem that's considered, because we'll look at it from multiple angles. And so I think it's really important. So from a research perspective, maybe, no, I don't think we'll be replaced. I think that we'll be super faculty, in some ways, research.
I feel better already.
You used an important word, which is accelerate, and I think that's what I worry about in some ways. That when I think of law, it's the gradual adjustment to new conditions. We all adjust, but artificial intelligence could happen on a time frame that is far faster than we as individuals or people with job skills or societies are used to adjusting and adapting, and I think that time question is one of the biggest ones for me.
Yeah, and I think, we're going to talk more about it in the policy, but retraining has to be a constant part of this process, and that can be tiring. But I was talking to our graduate director today, and he was saying students these days are not liking this. I'm going to get trained for 5 years, and then I'm going to go do a job. They want to do it now, and if AI is going to be able to teach me specifically what I need to do for this task, personalize it for me, why wait? Why do I have to go through this general training? And that is kind of playing to that idea, I guess. Who needs us if AI can do our jobs better, faster, quicker at any given moment, at any given place?
I'll take your word for it. All right, so we're going to stick with the economic implications of AIs, but we're going to talk a little bit about healthcare and health sciences. So there's a lot of hype about the implications of AI in healthcare. And so Jane, this one is yours. So here goes. Just as AI could be used to improve patient care through better refinement of diagnosis and treatment, it is possible that these techniques could result in lost applications in health sciences. Now, hold on, let me back up. It is possible that these techniques could result in lost jobs or imperfect or biased estimations that could actually degrade healthcare. Do you think AI applications in health sciences are a positive step forward, or do they exacerbate current problems that we already face?
Yes. I think they both accelerate and have the potential to exacerbate. And so speaking a little more in detail, as Orgul has so clearly noted, AI is uniquely suited for certain problems, just like each of us has strengths and areas that we struggle with. So AI needs to sort of, stay in its lane and be applied in the ways in which it's going to be most robust. And when we don't acknowledge that and we don't understand the ways in which it might poorly perform, then we are going to be at risk for adverse outcomes, whether it's healthcare or other outcomes. So to me, when I think about the opportunities, they far outshine the risk. But again, it also is sort of rooted in us not accelerating so fast that we aren't being thoughtful and thinking about what are these consequences, because there will be unintended consequences we won't even see until they lay before us. So some of the benefits that I see very clearly for the health sciences are automation of, for example, like digital or visual imaging. For example, the efficiency and the accuracy that AI methods can be applied to multiple different scans just outpaces, human ability, and that's going to allow us to be able to detect conditions earlier and with more precision, which I think is really obviously going to impact the outcome. I can see that even in research as well as clinical settings. Some of the work I do is looking at early signs of autism in 6-month-olds or 9-month-olds. Wow, that is so hard. 6-month-olds and 9-month-olds don't have a large repertoire of behavior. How are we going to detect when some might be at elevated risk or not? I'm not going to know to be able to see all of those subtleties, and I, with my visual system, am not even going to be able to detect those. So if we can apply AI techniques, for example, upload a picture of a home video, apply algorithms that's going to compare thousands and thousands of videos of children that we know end up with autism versus those who don't, those systems are going to be able to find discoveries that I would never be able to. Not only because of the way in which the methodology is applied, but it's going to learn from the patterns themselves and be able to then be nimbly adjust. So I see a lot of benefits in healthcare, but also as it translates into our scholarship as well. Another example that I can think of is in terms of, again, prediction and maybe surveillance, population screening. Ultimately, we want to prevent, health conditions from even occurring. How can we do that on such a, wide scale? It's going to take tremendous amount of data to be able to sort out why somebody might exhibit this feature and somebody else might not. And we have to be able to sort of do that at that scale or we won't be accurate. And yet, if we don't feed into that algorithm, if we don't feed into that system what we know to be important factors, such as age, maybe sex, maybe SES, then again, the outcome is going to be problematic and it's going to miss individuals. So for example, there may be health conditions for which the profile is extremely different for males versus females. And maybe we know that and maybe we don't. So we can't just deploy these sorts of techniques without sitting back and examining them, examining the outcome, finding the errors and the holes and plugging them in. So I do think there's many economic advantages. I think jobs will be lost, specific ones that AI could replace. I think many will be, there will be many new jobs, but I think many jobs will be changed, and most for the better.
That was terrific. Anybody else want to add?
No, I was very impressed with the brain surgery. I mean, it not only reduces type 1 error, but also type 2 error. You don't leave cancerous tissue behind, but also you don't take out tissue, unnecessarily. And that has great implications for the success and survival for these patients, and not having to deal with the cancer again. So I think healthcare is going to improve for sure. Doctors aren't going to be replaced for sure for a while, probably. But just today, Facebook was suggesting me the doctor's office of the future. I think all my AI reading is kind of feeding into the algorithms now, affecting what it suggests that I should look into. So all the advertisements on my Facebook feed is about AI. And the doctor's office of the future is basically full of machines that scan you and, basically drive predictions from your body temperature and your visual scans of your body.
This is a very hopeful message. Anybody want to add? Anybody on the game over theme?
I'm not game over theme, but just one thing I wanted to, just an example I give my students when I talk about machine learning is imagine you're trying to, this is what Jane was saying about these unintended consequences. Imagine you're trying to detect cancer, you have some scans of people with cancer, some without, and since most people don't have cancer, if you just give it to a model and say, just figure out which ones have cancer, say 99% of them are scans of people who don't have cancer, well, it can get 99% accuracy by just saying nobody has cancer. Well, that seems pretty easy to deal with. You just balance your data set, make sure 50% are people with cancer, 50% are people without. But, cancer usually occurs in older people, and so maybe it sees a scan of a younger person and just automatically says, oh no, they don't have cancer, and that helps it get a good accuracy. But, since this could be a relatively small portion of it, this goes unnoticed. And so, like Jane was saying, it's necessary to really interrogate these models, for a human to be there to try to interpret what's going on and try to say, oh, this doesn't make sense. It should have said this in this situation instead of that, and refine these models over and over and over again, constantly having human oversight to make sure that these unintended consequences don't happen.
Definitely. If you stop thinking about stuff, it's always going to be game over. And also access issue, if we cannot give equal access to everyone, it is just going to increase disparities that we so dislike, more. It's going to be huge gaps between who has access, who doesn't, and their health outcomes.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on to our next vignette. So that one is a vision for AI policy. That's pretty broad, right? So Jane, I'm going to come back to you on this one. AI has kind of become a buzzword. People want to use AI for anything and everything. Which problems should be tackled using AI, and which problems should not be?
Wow, yeah, you're right. AI is a bit of a buzzword. I was speaking with a colleague the other day, and they said, oh, it's not really AI, everything's just regression in the end. So, I feel like everything is regression. So we all have our own shared experience, we all think about it differently, and sometimes AI sounds a little more elegant or a little bit, more higher order. But I do think there are some tasks uniquely suited and those that are very poorly suited to AI. And clearly those that are, based on sort of objective, strong data sets that are mostly associated with prediction are going to be some of the best tasks for AI. And some of the tasks that are going to be least effective using those techniques are going to be the complicated tasks like trying to detect maybe like psychological disorders, right? So trying to detect whether somebody has anxiety or doesn't have anxiety or what kind of anxiety. It may seem straightforward, but it's not. There's 7 or 8 different types of anxiety disorders and the features overlap. And there's also a developmental sequence to them. It's very common for young kids, preschoolers, to have what's called specific phobia, which is the fear of one specific thing, right? Whether it's a frog or a ball or whatever. It's very common. Certain disorders in childhood lead to likelihood of other disorders, like separation anxiety as a child leads to generalized anxiety disorder in children over time. But none of these are deterministic, right? These are probabilities we're talking about, and encased in all of these considerations is that individual person who lives within a system that's being affected by multiple elements. So there's no way, in my mind, that AI is going to be able to replace the decisions and the practice of thoughtful human interactions and how we both identify positive health and well-being, as well as identify conditions. And when we think about the way we speak, the way we accent certain syllables, or whether we omit things, whether we speak slowly to emphasize something, or whether we look down while we're speaking, or whether we fidget, all of these nonverbals, along with the verbal language, are communication sources, right? And a human needs to be able to sort all that out and be able to figure out what seems to be most primary. Maybe there's two disorders going on. Maybe there's, something that was happening in the past that's occurring now. I think the complexity of the human psyche is an example of how AI would not be an appropriate method in terms of treatment and diagnosis.
Gotcha. So I'm actually going to go for the next question here. So this one is for Forest. And we're going to totally switch gears here. We're actually going to talk about education now. So is there a need for an AI core curriculum at the secondary or university education level? If so, how might you envision this coming to fruition? Similarly, how might individuals, for example, students, staff, or faculty, in non-AI fields gain a working understanding of AI that will prepare them for the current or the future advancements?
I think AI at the university level could be seen as a general education requirement for students. So, I got my bachelor's degree in electrical and computer engineering, and some of the general education classes were some of the most fun classes I actually had at the university. So like history, sociology, these types of things. And I think, even for like people in engineering and computer science, I don't think we know enough about it. And we often get criticized for this, not knowing enough about, humanities or social sciences. And I think it's true, and I really wish I had learned a lot more, and I'm trying to learn a lot more now. And I think, flipping it around, learning about AI would be really helpful to people, especially as it just becomes a part of people's lives, just to actually understand what's going on, how it can be applied in their own work, and how it could affect them. And so I would think one way to actually incorporate it as a general education requirement without having to have all the programming skills behind it is focusing on concepts and examples. So like I said, AI can be used to solve a class of problems. That's often how we classify a problem, and then think about which algorithms we could use, and then actually doing this with problems in the real world. So, if we want to do something with chemical synthesis, how do we actually classify this problem? You could classify it as, say, a pathfinding problem. Now you have all these algorithms available to you. So I think this would be a good way for people to get an intuition of how AI is working, what are its limitations, what are its promises for the future, how it could possibly affect them, and how it could enhance the work that they're doing.
I like it. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
OECD reports, and OECD has a lot of reports about this issue, a huge source of research. Main message I got from the reports was the highest growing jobs are going to be AI related. And so AI exposure is not always a bad thing when you're using computers, and when it's about managing the AI, sustaining the AI, and interpreting the AI, it is where the growth is going to be for jobs. And if that is the case, we need to teach people how to interpret, sustain, understand, and manage AI. And we're already kind of incorporating it in our curriculum. And I think it is definitely necessary for all fields across the university to make AI part of their curriculum. We need to all understand. We don't need to be able to do what Forest is doing, but we need to understand what it is doing, how it is doing it.
Absolutely. I think there's a tendency to talk about AI as though it's this discrete thing over here that we'll go and say hello to, and then we'll say, well, it was nice talking with you, and I'm going to go back over here for the rest of my life. And that's just not the reality. It's already so embedded in our existence. It's like saying, well, what things should we do with tools? Well, everything. What should we do with heat? Well, everything. And AI will, whether we're aware of it or not, frame our decisions. We will rely, because of lack of awareness or lack of knowledge or lack of time, on AI tools, even without necessarily understanding it.
Just sending our
it will
emails
be,
for us.
Exactly. It'll be a social, cultural, technological, economic force that cannot be avoided unless we make the deliberate decision to, stop history now, which people do every now and then, but most of us don't. And so it's not just, as I think you said so well, it's more than understanding the technologies narrowly, it's incorporating them in every way into our critical thinking. And so we need philosophers and hackers in the broadest sense, and economists who think about these issues writ large. And that is AI every bit as much as the design of the systems.
Thank you for mentioning economists.
All right. I can't believe how fast time is going here. So we're going to get to our last theme now, which is artificial general intelligence. So before we get to the last two questions, I wanted to see, there's one here for you, Jane, to talk a little bit about, lead us into this. The notion of human intelligence is highly debated and somewhat controversial. If we can't even agree on what intelligence is for humans, how reasonable is it to think that we will be able to agree that machines are intelligent or not?
Great question. So, yes, for thousands of years, since the dawn of time, man has wanted to measure ourselves, right? And put ourselves in bins and hierarchies, of course, where somebody's more capable and less capable. And while there can be a lot of misuse of those sort of practices, there can be some practical reasons why that's valuable. In the end, you want to be employed in a position that you have the skills for, right? So stratification, and whether it's through intelligence or other skills, is really pretty valuable in some ways. But absolutely right. I mean, there's huge controversies about what intelligence is, and it's actually incredibly complex, right? There's fair agreement on a couple of different domains. One is described more as like factual knowledge or crystallized knowledge, and that's where we just learn basic facts. It's sort of information-based, knowledge-based. I think in that way, AI can definitely contribute, and in many ways it's going to be far more intelligent than we will ever be. The other ways in which intelligence is sort of conceptualized is through fluid intelligence, or more of a skill or process-based. This is about like memory or speed of processing. How quickly can we catch on, and how quickly can we sort of crank through the information to come to an outcome? In some ways as well, AI is going to outpace us. They're going to be able to process more information more quickly in many situations. So depending on how we define intelligence, we absolutely can measure it in in applications and in machines. But again, there's also the emotional intelligence that Orgul mentioned as well, and that's the ability to determine what's being said and how it's being said and what meaning that holds for us. And that is absolutely critical for us as social beings, because for us to operate successfully, we need to do that with each other. And so to be able to detect whether somebody's facial expression is angry or tired or frustrated or confused is not going to be picked up very well by machines. And then to couple that with the subtleties of other elements of body language, whether you're standing up, whether your arms are folded, whether you're speaking loudly again, all of those subtleties are very important, and they're also a part of intelligence. And I think that's where AI is really going to struggle and fall short.
Or exceed our expectations.
We'll see.
I mean, it could be that those are the exact things that they're good at picking up at.
Well, hold that thought, because I think that's a really good lead into our first question, and that one is actually for you, Bryant. So here it is. It's short.
We didn't plan this.
It's short, but it's not simple. Will AI ever be able to function as generally and flexibly as a human?
Yes. Well, I mean, no. So, what's the limit? As time approaches infinity, right? Yes. I think if we went back in history 2,000 years and presented someone with a toaster, they would worship it as their new god. What is this thing? It can create heat. It can cook food. And right, if 2,000 years in the future, I will not even begin to comprehend what can happen. But if we constrain that a little bit, I think I can offer maybe a more helpful answer. So first, I think it builds on what you were saying, Jane. Larry Tesler, back in the 1970s, said intelligence is whatever machines haven't done yet. And I think our definition of intelligence will probably evolve as our technologies evolve. And if we're talking about artificial general intelligence, that is a system or systems that are robust enough to basically do everything we can and better, flexibly and reliably, that's really tough. But it might not be necessary to do everything, right? So when we talk about automated driving, for example, in theory, we don't have level 5 automated driving until the vehicle can go in Mumbai or a thunderstorm or every road on the earth. But maybe getting to work and back every day is good enough. Maybe getting to a doctor is good enough. Maybe certain applications of AI that are still, technically narrow are nonetheless sufficient to incredibly change our lives for better or for worse. And there's been an idea over the last couple decades in technology more generally that second best is okay. That there are a lot of demands that could be met by systems that aren't ideal in every way, but maybe do what we need them to do. Our dean at the law school came in with a vision for access to justice. The idea that we have a lot of lawyers, but we have a lot of legal problems, and there's a mismatch. And maybe we don't need the lawyer who charges $4,000 an hour for every case to make a really big difference in the lives of the people who need some lawyer, right? And so maybe there are applications of AI that aren't universally robust, but are enough to meet the real needs that we have. And I think that's where my answer is the qualified yes, or it doesn't matter, but yeah, we'll get there.
Excellent.
No, I mean, I don't know if there will be an artificial general intelligence after talking to Forest enough. I know, hopefully no. But on the other hand, I mean, why hopefully? Why is it bad? Writing and reading was met with a lot of anxiety and suspicion because it was going to replace memory, and the knowledge wasn't generated. It was just going to be, reading something that's already been known or discovered. That was thought to be against human knowledge or just big threats against human intelligence. Maybe this will enable us to ask more questions better. And as long as I think if we are ahead of the curve and do not stop asking questions, do not stop reading, writing, thinking, and not rely on AI to just do everything for us. But if we continue to ask questions, general intelligence or AI that is more sophisticated, I don't know if it is necessarily a bad thing. It can do the hard stuff for us, and we can do maybe more sophisticated thinking. But Forrest says it's not possible, and all my scientific sci-fi readings I'm going to put aside, and for now I'm not going to freak out. So at least I know if it happens, it is potentially good too, not all bad.
I mean, when it comes to AGI, the thing I always wonder about is like consciousness. I wonder, how much us being conscious affects, what we deem as being intelligent or creative. Maybe not just intelligent, but like creative or, just the way we think about ourselves. And so, I don't know, perhaps there can't be a silicon-based consciousness, maybe a quantum computer or something, but maybe if we just restrict ourselves for now to just silicon-based computing, maybe they can never develop consciousness for whatever reason. And then maybe that imposes some limits on what they are able to do. And maybe not in the sense of solving well-defined problems. Maybe we can define problems rigorously, and maybe they'll be able to eventually solve all of those problems. But these things that we think of as being creative and extremely poignant, like we see with music or movies, things like that, just those little subtleties that just really touch our heart. Who knows? I mean, I feel like without that conscious experience, maybe it will never be able to do it. But maybe there's some other types of computing that could be conscious. Who knows?
Ooh, there's a big one. We better not get into what is consciousness. We'll be here till midnight. So we're going to go into the last question then. And Orgul, we're going to come to you on this one. And it's just like the one before. It's short, but it's complex. Will AGI eventually replace human knowledge generation?
I mean, like I said, I think, so Forest tells me it can't, at least with silicon-based computers. But potentially, I think, if we have enough units of different AIs thinking parallel fashion in neural networks, but all connected, possibly they can create some new knowledge. And I mean, your AI is supposed to create new knowledge. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And it may enable us to think about new stuff and ask new questions. And yes, it may one day be ahead of us in terms of knowledge generation, but in a very specific way, I think. At least in a very restricted way. At least I hope.
I keep joking, like, if my research is actually successful, the only person it would really replace is me, because, I want to create, just be able to use AI at the frontiers of research and discover new knowledge, ideally in collaboration with humans. But, if I'm extra successful, then, maybe I wouldn't be necessary anymore. But you made such a good point right before this. It's like, okay, you can discover new knowledge, but then how do you ask the right question?
Yeah.
So I think also asking the right question is really important. Can AI learn to do that? Like, I think eventually yes, but maybe then my role would be just kind of relegated.
I shouldn't have given you ideas. I mean, now you're going to then make an AI that can ask questions too.
Yeah, but that's another important thing is like, what's the right question? And I still think that's something AI can do. So I think it will, and there are some examples of it being able to discover knowledge that we haven't yet discovered. Not in these profound ways yet, but this example I gave with the matrix multiplication, I think is really exciting because this is something people have been doing for decades, and then AI comes along and has an algorithm that's better than what humans have created. And I think that's amazing. And I think, eventually my research is going to hopefully be able to solve all sorts of puzzles in ways that we haven't thought of before, or, synthesize chemicals in ways we haven't thought of before. That's my hope. So if I'm successful, then that would be another, I think, very significant example. And so I think as these algorithms improve, eventually it will just be able to discover knowledge in ways that surpass us. But just like you said, can it ask the right questions? Then, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Jane, Bryant.
AI-generated knowledge is human-generated knowledge.
Oh, why do you say that?
It's us. Even if we invent the machine that invents the machine that invents the machine that invents the machine, it's us. It's our creation. We, or at least you, can take some pride in that. And many of the systems are based on data that we generate, better or worse, decisions that we make, framing that we impose, for better or worse. And I don't want to divorce AI from us. Now, the challenges I think you've mentioned is not just asking the right questions, but ensuring that these systems are forward-looking rather than just backward-looking. The data that we've already created, how do we jolt it into a new way of thinking, into new ideas? And I think there will be, again, this combination of human agents and machine agents doing this very delicate dance And the result will be more knowledge, more generation, but ultimately human-generated. Thanks for asking.
And I don't see it as overly simplistic that it's going to replace. I think that it's a matter of augmenting and integration. So I think, when we think about intelligence, it's not going to be just one type or one replacement. It's going to be either or. I think there are times and ways in which it'll be one versus the other, but I think there'll be far more times when it's going to be integrated. It's going to be human, driven, interpreted, informed AI.
All my fears that are related to AI actually has nothing to do with capabilities of AI, in essence, but who is going to own AI? How are we going to deal with the concentration of this very powerful tool in certain hands? Who is going to, have access to AI? And if you cannot regulate it, if you don't make it accessible, if you cannot make this very democratic, very, everybody's rights has to be protected or everybody's access has to be protected, then the fact that AI is really good and can do think for us, I think it is fine. It's just if it is only doing that for some group, some specific group, that is where I think where the danger can start.
So much for saying that. I don't think the battle in the future will be between human and machine. It will be between centralization and decentralization. And who has these powers?
Yeah. It's that way right now too, but you're talking about some.
Excellent. So I think this is a really good time to actually take questions from the audience. I'm sure that you guys have some questions. Debbie, how are we gonna do questions with the microphones? Okay.
Howdy.
Stan?
Sure. Thank you for your discussion. It was really interesting. And one of the things that I immediately take away from this is that there seems to be a complete categorical fusion between two things of very, very, very different categories. Most of what I've heard here is what I would describe AEHI, artificially enhanced human intelligence, because that's what you've been mostly talking about. Artificially enhanced human intelligence is a calculator. A handheld calculator is artificially enhanced human intelligence. Now we're just going big time. I mean, the computers that we had, the floppy disks that we had that had, like a meg on them, 30 years ago now are like, 500, logarithmically more than that. The other side of that, the silicon intelligence that you described just a moment ago, that might someday be, and you won't know it's there until it's too late. The only actual artificial intelligence I can come up with in my head is Stanley Kubrick's 2001: Space Odyssey computer HAL. And that was too late, right? So what we're doing here is we're talking about tools. We're mostly talking about human-used tools. And I think that we lose sight of something when we think about humans as individuals as opposed to humans as collective intelligence. Because we have as much intelligence as a collective. And most of what the intelligence that our society has is as a collective. When you talk about ants and termites and moles and other colony-like creatures that have intelligence, but they don't have intelligence as individuals, they have intelligence as colonies. And we are now progressed into a space in our evolution where we have intelligence as a collective. No single person in this auditorium has the kind of intelligence that the human collective has. And what we're using artificially enhanced algorithms, artificially enhanced data, artificially enhanced instruments to upload and generate huge quantities of information that we are the drivers of, as you all described, right? So the question isn't, should we be afraid of artificial intelligence? I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, it's not, as I said, if it happens, it'll be too late when we find out. But in the meantime, we have all these tools that we're using. And my biggest question to you all, and this is the thing that was just burning in my mind a minute ago when I was thinking about ant colonies and termite colonies and mole colonies, is this. Colonies of termites and bees and ants don't make mistakes.
You're coming up to a question, right?
Yes, I am, absolutely. Colonies of ants and bees don't make mistakes. They survive. So how is it then that the human collective intelligence often makes catastrophic mistakes. The mistakes that led to World War I, the mistakes that led to World War II, and the mistakes that we are worried about this week. How does human intelligence get it so wrong? So I'll leave that.
Thank you. Who wants to start?
The philosopher.
Oh. So we haven't exterminated ourselves yet. Maybe we're approaching that. And I think this goes back to your point about centralization. Are we becoming so connected, and are the consequences so instantaneous and so massive that in fact we do have that world-ending ability, or at least ability to end our world, whether through AI or through other technologies, quickly or slowly? I haven't studied ants. I would imagine that they have probably made some pretty catastrophic mistakes too. Let's build on this. Let's build on this dam. That will be fine. And then the water comes. And so I think it's the robustness and the diversity of systems that allows them to persist even when the individuals or even the collectives do make catastrophic mistakes. That connects well back to AI because what are we centralizing and what are we decentralizing? What are we, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, please.
We're, I think, pretty good at trying to destroy ourselves without the aid of AI. Even though we couldn't do it yet. Just environmental problems we are having, right? And AI, there are several areas where AI actually introduced some solutions. For example, it can actually really predict energy usage and reduce energy usage. Because most of the time, why can we develop the alternative energy sources as much as we want to, we would like to, because it is unpredictable. But if AI can make better predictions, we can actually have better alternative energy technology, store it better, carry it better, use it better, and need less energy and hopefully cause less environmental problems. And it can also, probably help us solve our food problems, food distribution problems, deal with world hunger in a better way. It is in our hands to, yes, quickly destroy ourselves and make ourselves irrelevant, but also solve all the problems we're already suffering from through the AI, the technological implications that it has for us.
It's an interesting question of what we use and what we collectively decide to refrain from, which might also be a human characteristic.
All right. Next question.
Hi, thank you. I really loved how diverse of a background all of you come from, and I've just so stunning to kind of hear your different expertises and overlaps and intersections in real time, so thank you. My question, I think, is related to the fact that it seemed like much of what you spoke about was what AI can do for us as humans. What functions can it fill? In what ways can it be applied? I'm curious what your thoughts are about what AI will do to humans, in the sense of what kind of impact do you see AI making on, for instance, human nature? You mentioned the types of intelligence that we might try to prioritize. Do you see that kind of changing, for example, how we as a society go about thinking about things, feeling about things, how it might impact, for instance, our stories, how it might impact our art? It's a very big question, but I'd be curious to hear your individual thoughts.
Can I give a shot? That is such a great question. All sorts of images and thoughts are spinning. But it makes me think, who knows, one outcome could be the result of AI on us is that we start to question ourselves as humans and whether our input, our experiences are less or more valuable. If we start to compare ourselves to a solution generated by a machine that others think is superior to what we might come up with, there might start being this kind of notion that human intelligence is less so. And what does that then mean? Where does that sort of slippery slope take you? Does it mean then all other experiences or other aspects of being human also are sort of degraded in light of the elevated either output that can be seen as being more accurate, more correct, more intelligent, I do think it could actually sort of create a lot of questions about our identity and about our worth in ways, that would be important how they're tackled and how they're resolved. I mean, we could be giving away power or control to other systems in belief that they are more accurate than we are, is maybe one consequence.
We were actually just talking about something like this right beforehand, and this is a really good question. So just like you were mentioning DALL-E, and then also these deep fakes, you can make it look like somebody was doing something.
Just explain real quick what deepfake is.
So with these deep fakes, you can say, for example, make it look like Obama kicked a guy in the face or something like that, but it didn't really happen. So you can fake somebody doing something that didn't really happen. And so we were actually just talking about, imagine you take a person and then make a video of them doing something terrible to somebody else or having something terrible done to them. I feel like, this could really affect how you perceive yourself. Just imagine like pictures, if I get a good picture of me taken, that really affects, I go, man, I'm looking good. Like I get an ego boost and everything, just from a picture. But just imagine some hyper-realistic video of me doing something that I can't identify with at all. How is that going to make me affect how I think about myself? I mean, I feel kind of scared thinking about this actually being brought to life. And then another thing about AI doing things to humans, it's not just, AI autonomously doing things to humans, but humans using AI to do things to humans. And so one thing I say with AI is it just makes it easier to do, to say, for example, surveil people, to spy on people, just makes it easier to do. It makes it easier to hurt somebody else, to kill somebody else, to bomb somebody else. It just makes it easier. And so, that's something I worry about a lot.
The history of civilizations meeting civilizations is, I guess we could say, fraught. It hasn't necessarily, at least in the short term, turned out well often. And there's lots of complexity there and lots of justifiable criticism. I say that because one way of thinking of AI is a meeting of civilizations, and perhaps even equivalent to an alien civilization coming to our planet and introducing themselves. And whether that's culturally or spiritually or psychologically or materially, that is a profound existential challenge. And I think your phrasing of what will AI do to us captures that nicely.
Okay.
This question is mainly directed towards Professor Smith, but if anybody has any thoughts on it, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. As a law student, I'm kind of encouraged to think often about the limitations of what the law can do if we think of the law as a tool. And of course, many of our panelists have talked about centralization versus decentralization of power when it comes to something like a non-rival good or product like artificial intelligence. This is something that can be pretty easily and pretty costlessly copied, pasted, and distributed. If it's a piece of software, if it's just code, rather than something that is a natural resource, power that comes from a natural resource, or power that comes from something that's manufactured and scarce. And so when you have a power that is so decentralized, if you have AI that is open access and widely distributed, to what extent do you think that law, with its centralized nature, is able to kind of mitigate the harms that could be caused by any number of individual bad actors with the incredible amount of power that comes from decentralized AI? Does that make sense?
Wow, I love that question. Can you tell us your name?
Eric Baxley.
Thank you for coming. So how does law, which is traditionally so centralized, grapple with some visions of AI which are so decentralized? Is that a fair characterization of your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so one way is law evolves, and that's the story of law or technology of progress, right? You take one set of problems and you replace them with a new set of problems, and you just really hope your new set in aggregate is smaller than your old. And so law will work its way through that. One answer might be more decentralized notions of law. That this has been one of the kind of unfulfilled promises of blockchain technologies, of pushing centralization down into discrete relationships. One is thinking about law in terms of power and ways that we can use both law and tools like AI to empower different organizations in society, different collectives. So much about law has been that, saying, well, we should create a corporation. Like, corporations didn't exist outside of the law. It should do something for the state. And then that evolved, and then law said, oh, now corporations are really powerful. Well, then we should impose obligations on them, like the common carrier rule that they have to serve everybody. And then that proceeded a little while, and then law adjusted further and put additional obligations on this creature it had created. So perhaps unions are the same. Right? Law said, oh, we should recognize that workers also should be able to exercise in the collective, and we should give them certain rights. And law created that. And so maybe law in combination with technology will empower new collectives, new ways of us using AI tools or other tools to identify our preferences, to link with others with those preferences, to form bases of influence. To interact more efficiently with centralized authorities like governments or companies. There are ways that law could do this. Law is, as I think you've suggested, very much about power, redirecting power and constraining power. And it's always been a very imperfect system. And it will continue to be. One of the things that I think is very interesting is the way that law might move toward perfect enforcement, not ideal enforcement, but perfect enforcement. The idea that increasingly more and more violations of the law are detectable and hence punishable, if not remediable. And I think AI will play a role in that as well. So all of us are lawbreakers. We may or may not know it. Will we be called on it through these tools? Ultimately, I wonder, what will we empower? Will we empower individuals? May or may not go very well. Will we empower collectives, communities, corporations, governments? And I think we'll see very different models emerging around the globe. That's a wonderful question and a very inadequate answer that maybe others can add to. Thank you for asking it.
Wonderful.
I have a question.
Right here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this discussion and so many generative questions. And I think this event itself is very commendable, given that it is bringing to public some of the prescient concerns about how we are thinking about the university and so on. Well, I have a question, kind of like turning a question around that you all have been playing with. And I think there are two things that are looming in the background. One is question of capitalism, right? We can talk about centralization, decentralization, but it's actually a question of inequities and policy problems that already exist, and many solutions that are there that directly implicates AI and ourselves in it, and these are concerns you raised. The other thing that kept coming up were questions that, what are the cautionary moments within AI? It often tacked to questions of imagination, questions of friendship, or like relationship, questions of trust, right? So, and in thinking about, I think, going back to that earlier moment when you were saying maybe AI should become a general education program, I'd also like for us all to think, and perhaps you would have a response in thinking, how do we think of that when, if our central question is, what would AI be for, or what is a better life, when it's happening at a moment when humanities and social sciences are underfunded, and there are, silos in conversations around it. So if it is a question of what is it that AI should serve, then it shouldn't just be about what should we learn about AI, but also how those concerns about what the technology can become is tax into questions and concerns that we already have with the human condition, right? So I think it's central to how we think about capitalism, how we think about our university systems, and what new we can do that's not entirely pushed by industry alone, but concerns that like affect all of us. Thank you.
Anybody want to follow up on that?
No, this is kind of related to what I was saying previously about AI being publicly funded. And so, everybody, we all pay our taxes and put our money into this, and there's always risk involved. Not every project pans out. And so we all fund the risk. We don't have capitalism with the risk. It's socialized. We're all funding the risk. But, the rewards, so you get AI that can do these jobs a lot more efficiently. If those rewards, the profits, are then privatized, and so people lose their jobs but don't see any payoff from what they put their hard-earned money into, then this is, of course, in my opinion, just wrong. And so, like I was saying, if AI is used to replace your job, this should actually be a good thing. You shouldn't see a decrease in your quality of life, and you should have more free time to do things that you're interested in. So I think one is just the asymmetry between the risk being this is a social risk, socialized, but then I don't know if the rewards are really going to also be socialized as well, and I think they should be.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that we are not getting into mines and doing all the dirty work, hard work anymore. Machines are doing it for us. I think it's similarly. I mean, it is probably unavoidable some of the tasks to be replaced. I mean, us to be replaced in those tasks. But we need to make it so that the benefits are distributed in a way that is not necessarily equal, but people who are losing the most are protected. Whatever the policy, it's not only about AI generation, but whatever the policy we create to, I don't want to use regulate, but regulate AI-related stuff has to take those into consideration, has to people who are the biggest losers into consideration, so that it doesn't turn into gaps are getting bigger, disparities are increasing.
I think as the questioner said, it's a question.
We got two questions, so let's wrap up. So one, and then two, and then we're good. So,
hello. My question is related to the curation of a lot of the data for these algorithms, and I've heard it mentioned a couple times about opening up the algorithms, but I don't think it's really been discussed yet about opening up the data. And I don't know if you heard of Kaggle. It's used by a lot of programming students, people that are learning to do data science. And a lot of the data there is open, and that's one of the things that's really enhanced people's ability to learn and make it more accessible. And my question was, how do you see the future of a lot of this data as a lot of it's being privatized? And do you think that's going to have an impact on the equity question when it comes to AI?
Question. It is an excellent question. I don't know the answer to it, but yes, I don't think making AI publicly available without, making the data that goes with it publicly available is not going to be what we want.
One thing with the data, when we collaborate with people, say at Prisma Health, it's really important to meet the HIPAA requirements, and so we have to make sure everyone does certain training so they can know how to protect people's privacy and things like that. But the data that's used is really almost determines the final outcome when it comes to, say, some very straight up machine learning tasks. The data that's used can really affect that final outcome. And so if people don't know anything about the data it was trained on, maybe someone has some special concern, can it handle this one edge case? And it's not an edge case that can easily be just tested. Maybe there's a whole set of edge cases they're interested in. One thing that they could look at is, well, are there any of these cases in the data? And if they're not, then you probably shouldn't trust this model. And so I think at least, maybe not, I don't think we should just release all the data because there's a lot of private information about people, but some way to query and ask, are there these specific cases in the data while also maintaining people's privacy would be very important. That's a great question. Yeah.
It's something I think the European data law got wrong philosophically. That is, I'm not sure we should default to the idea that data belongs to each individual. Rather, data belongs kind of to the collective, to all of us. And there should be that opportunity to interrogate it and to contribute to it as a whole. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to take the last question right here.
Thank you. My question adds on to that, and that is a big part of artificial intelligence power has to do with being fed a large volume of correctly labeled data. And we talk about Prisma, and I'm a physician, and I also have a PhD in computer science and in neural networks. So as a physician, I've been extremely disappointed in how little artificial intelligence helps us practice medicine. And there are a host of reasons for that. But I had my real eureka moment a couple of years ago. I'm a real fan of Elon Musk's, and I've been following the autonomous self-driving. And he had the beta out, and his onboard computers were pretty sophisticated, and they were able to analyze 1,000 times a second what everything in their environment was, and very accurately. He could label things, and he knew what it was, and when he got it to 95% and they were starting to try it out, when they ran over a lady in a bicycle or ran into a stalled ambulance, that didn't do very well, and Elon Musk is not one that takes failure well. And so he went back to the drawing board and said, why did these things happen? And he realized that, yes, they were able to label the data. They knew that was a bike and they knew that was an ambulance, but they didn't realize that they were either still or moving, at what speeds they were moving. So he threw out the entire program that he'd spent hundreds of millions of dollars developing and had accurate ability to predict what the environment was, when he realized what we have to do is take everything that we find and create a little computer for that, a little bot, as it were, and be able to say, what is that thing doing and where's it going? And it has to stay alive until it leaves the scene. And so he threw out the entire program, and throughout the processor, he said, well, no processor is good enough to process what I want to do. And so did he quit? No. He developed a whole new processing chip to be able to handle the volume of data, and the way he described it, that was my eureka moment, was say, we have to have data as vectors, not scalars. He went from 2 dimensions, from 1 dimension, and that changed the whole scope of AI, and that's what I hope we can do in medicine one day, is to be able to look at a patient as a point in time, not just as a scale, or not just say, okay, you've got diabetes and hypertension, you're overweight and all this other stuff. We need to say, are you getting fatter, or are you getting skinnier? Is your pressure getting worse? We need to be able to look at things that are moving in multidimensional space if we ever hope to do it. And my question to you is in terms of Musk, what he's done with autonomous self-driving, since his approach is so different, is there any hope that anybody could catch him? What he's done with creating these bots that are so accurate and that don't have anything to do with the speed of the processor, it has to do with totally looking at artificial intelligence from a whole new perspective. Is that an order of magnitude higher than anyone else has done? And does that mean when he says that when he releases his autonomous self-driving, no one will be able to touch Tesla? Thank you.
So I don't know too much about Musk's his technology for the self-driving car, but from what I understand, instead of focusing on an image and seeing what's in that image, looking at those images across time and making inferences based on those images across time. So these temporal models in AI have existed for some decades now, and so there's actually a lot of exciting work being done with these temporal models to actually be able to process sequences of whatever it is, images, sound, just sequences of data better and actually get a story out of this temporal information. One of the, I think, fundamental concerns when it comes to this is these models that are built on neural networks are really easy to fool. So say, for example, I show you a picture of a boat, and then I could change like 1 or 2 pixels. The change wouldn't really be perceptible to a human. Just change 1 or 2 pixels, or make tiny changes to all the pixels so that you couldn't even tell. Then that neural network would think the boat was now a tiger or something like that. It looks almost the same, but now it thinks it's a tiger. And so when it comes to self-driving cars, imagine someone was able to change a stop sign almost imperceptibly, like just write on it with a marker, and then now the car doesn't see the stop sign. And so, that when it comes to just these purely neural network-based approaches, I don't know if this is what Musk or Tesla is doing, but I've seen a lot of these things for object detection, object activity recognition, knowing what somebody is doing by looking at a video of them across time, so you can know, are they crossing the street this way or are they crossing the street that way, those types of things, is that if they're built on neural networks, they all have this same susceptibility of tiny changes that a human wouldn't even notice, giving completely different outputs. And so, that fundamental problem is still going to be there. And so I don't think self-driving cars based purely on neural networks they wouldn't be safe enough for me, at least right now, to actually feel comfortable with them on the road. Yeah.
All right. Anybody want to add to that? All right. I think this is a perfect moment to then stop. Please thank our panel.